I'm inviting Enid and Jazz to the main stage. Enid is known both locally and nationally for her pioneering work in positive youth development, education, and community building, and has a deep understanding of the work within systems to support young people. She is founder of Brave Consulting Services and a current Annie E. Casey Foundation Children, Youth, and Families Fellow. And then Jazz is a data specialist with the Chattanooga Regional Homeless Coalition and is a Jim Casey Young Fellow and Annie E. Casey with the Annie E. Casey Foundation and a fellow with the Tennessee Justice Center, and comes to the stage bringing a wealth of experience and insights to our central question for today. So I want to thank you both for joining us. The National Urban League video provided us with a powerful introduction to today's conversation. And with that introduction in mind, I'd like to give you each an opportunity to tell us a bit about yourself and your story by way of introduction. And I'd like to start with Jazz first.
Good morning or afternoon to you all. I'm happy to be here speaking with you. As Alicia stated, my name is Jazz Snell, and I'm both a national advocate and consultant. And I come with a range of child welfare and juvenile justice experience between the states of Florida and Tennessee from as early as age 4, from recollection, I believe age 4. A little about myself. I grew up by a single mother of 4 daughters in poverty, and we experienced homelessness countless times. It was at age 13 that I formally entered foster care with one older sibling. And we were separated and disconnected from our 19 and 10-year-old sisters within the first year. At age 15, my family was legally replaced. And by 16, that adoption had failed with no adequate supports or connections. By age 17, I had become homeless and truant. And within 6 months of knowing me, my truancy worker took me into her home and became my family. And with time, unconditional and non-transactional love and support from my new family, I was enabled to embark my own journey of healing, which led to understanding, which then allowed me to truly love myself in spite of experiences and feel determined for my own future. So feelings of embarrassment, shame, deep pain, and even anger now translate to lessons and landmarks that I'm proud to have overcome, and it fuels my passion for the work that I do.
Thank you for that introduction, Jazz. I want to give Enid an opportunity to introduce herself, and I know we had a bit of a conversation in preparing for this, so you all are well acquainted with each other.
My name is Enid Ray, and I consider myself to be a place-based leader. I grew up in Hartford, Connecticut, and my passion for this work really stems from just believing that, community is really where my energies and I get my joy from, and where I think the kind of instruments are for us to make change. Just a little bit about myself. I am a professional here in Hartford that has had various lives and roles. I've worked in philanthropy, education, juvenile justice, and most recently, I am now a consultant, helping others think about these issues. For me, the story that comes to mind, I was a sophomore or my second year of law school when I was doing my internship, basically, and working for the prosecutor here in Hartford. And so I was at criminal court every day. And I remember I was sitting there waiting to go on with my client, second year law student, thinking I'm going to do criminal law. And out of the corner of my eye, I see this young man that I kind of recognize, and I hear him call my name, Enid, Enid. And he's shackled. So if you've ever been in court, it's pretty striking to see someone shackled. I mean, wrists, feet, and there's a chain that connects everything. And he's getting ready to be sent or presented before the judge, not with me, but another fellow attorney And he says, Enid, do you remember me? Do you remember me, Israel? And I was trying to place him and then realized that he was the son of a family that my family used to support that took care of all of us, the neighborhood kids, when we would come home from school. And I could see him, not in his adult self, but in his little boy face with his sisters and his brothers, all of us walking to our local school. And he says, do you remember me? Do you remember class? I was in your 4th grade class with Miss Clifford, and she used to read to us. Do you remember the readings of James and the Giant Peach? And immediately the memory came back to me of being a 4th grader, coming back from lunch, and our teacher, Miss Clifford, asking us to quiet down, turning the lights low, and that we could put our heads on the table. And she would start to read from Ronald Dahl's James and the Giant Peach. And we would all settle down, and it would be a moment of togetherness, a moment of her trying to provide for us what some of us didn't have at home. And Miss Clifford and I was privileged to work with her when I was in our school district. And I often asked her, how did you know to do that? What made you do some of the things you did in the classroom? And I learned that she was a new teacher. And I think we were probably one of her first classes. And we would laugh and she would say, I needed a break too. And that was her opportunity to join us and make us feel calm. What struck me about this, though, was that in a moment where this young man was about to face a judge and he had not made, obviously, great decisions about his life, his best memory and the memory that joined us was not family, was 4th grade and Miss Clifford's class. And so that day changed my whole orientation about the work that I was doing in law school. I thought I could be a criminal prosecutor. It was heartbreaking, right, to realize that I couldn't do it, not because I didn't have the chops, because I know I did, but because I would be seeing people like Israel every day. Because many of us came out successfully from that 4th grade class, thanks to Miss Clifford. But there were also a good number of us that had difficult life circumstances. And so it changed my whole career trajectory that day. Israel and the memory of James and the Giant Peach in 4th grade.
So I want to thank you both for giving us an introduction to yourselves and an introduction to your stories. And what I'd like to do is to invite you all to talk about 1 or 2 lessons that you learned from your experiences and from the introductory story that you gave to us. And I wonder, Jazz, if you'd be willing to start again with just some lessons you're bringing to us today.
For me, there were 2 big lessons from my experience. The first is that chosen family is real and must be fully supported. And for that to happen, there must be a shift from choosing or prescribing what family should look like, in addition to which family is best or acceptable for a young person, and instead allow that young person the choice of who they would like their family to be or continue to be. For me, I'm 10 years after post meeting my mom, and she's still my mom. And she's not the person who was paid to care for me until I became of age. And yes, we've had financial and health struggles without system supports, but we still choose to love one another and be in connection to one another. I know that I'm going to stop and breathe, because every time I talk about my mom, it gets me in my feels. But I do know that I belong to my mom's, her pack, and she will always show me unwavering love. And she even supports me staying engaged with my natural family. So chosen family is very, very important. And some of those families may be untraditional, but should still be a weighted option. The second lesson from my experience is that systems can integrate beyond reporting and monitoring of services. They both can and should be used as a precautionary measure to prevent further system involvement or even cross-system involvement. In my case, systems did interact, but it wasn't intentional or for the betterment of myself. Child welfare, juvenile justice, education, housing, and health were systems I engaged simultaneously as a minor, and still ended displaced and homeless with medical needs. So the lesson there is system integration is something that can be a safety net to identify and connect folks to resources outside of what the current system offers without requiring formal system involvement. Those are my big two lessons.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm curious, Enid, just in kind of hearing those lessons, if you want to respond and add on to those lessons.
Yeah, I think Jazz, has spoken so well to the importance of the familial connection, right? And, children don't live in systems. They should live in families. But systems have an important role to play. And I think that is really at the core of my story, that schools, for example, as systems, can play a pivotal role in providing children that sense of connection and belonging where there might be no other avenues. Israel was in his intact family, but yet that is the piece that for him was imprinted. And so it's these small, sometimes insignificant, brave acts that make the difference. And I wondered when I worked in the school system, what made my elementary school so different. And some of the things that came out were that it had a stable principal for a long time, and good or bad, he was always focused on kids. And so there was a feeling of that folks had permission to do what they needed to do to support young people. And so sometimes we're waiting for someone to tell us, right, you can do this, when all it takes is for us to step out and connect and bravely take the risk, right, of that connection and bring that sense of dignity to our young people. Because I think that's really something that I've reflected on that moment that he was at his most vulnerable. This was the thing. And so systems don't have to be as formal as we make them out to be, because they're made up of people who can act and can willingly make determinations about how they want to engage.
So talk about brave acts. Talk about brave acts on behalf of adults within settings and systems, and having permission and or stepping out. And I'm curious what supports are needed in ecosystems to support youth and young adults, and how you think about what's needed to help adults within systems really feel empowered to provide those supports. As you again put it, Enid, to be brave.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of brave acts in our current scenario, right? COVID has made it so that we have to take brave acts. I recall when I was, leading a local nonprofit, we pre-COVID, we would have never paid for cell phones for young people who were newly released, right, from incarceration or congregate care. It seemed like a luxury, right? Like, why would we be paying somebody's cell phone bill? I don't want to pay my own kid's cell phone bill, right? Mm-hmm. That kind of thing. And then COVID hit, and we realized that if our young people did not have cell phones, they were going to then be hit up with a parole, violation. They were going to be hit up with violations because they were not checking in with their parole officers and staff. And so as a community agency, we had to make a determination that this now wasn't essential as a place to sleep or stay, food, and that we needed to advocate for young people. And it took a bit. It was not a quick, oh, we say it's a need. It took people being on Zoom for a few weeks, right? And staff trying to figure out, how am I going to do my work if I can't see my clients face to face, to realize, oh yeah, maybe I can call them. If they have a phone, I can still have that connection and manage my caseload. So that's just kind of a simple one from that's very current. We've had to reimagine the world of work. We've had to reimagine, how do we connect to each other in places like this, a Zoom meeting, right? It takes bravery and it takes vulnerability. It takes us willing to share something that maybe in person we would have held back a little bit on.
Jazz, do you have thoughts to add here? What does it take?
Yes, I would, in addition to what Enid has shared, I would say the supports that are needed are both structural and cultural. So under the structural piece, that's more so infrastructure, in my opinion. So this is a matter of caseloads and having healthy workforce and staffing numbers, as well as who is hired on to do this work. And on the cultural side, I'm thinking more of mindsets and believing in uplifting young people and their families, getting back to your why, because ultimately, I do fully believe that everyone who comes to work in systems have great intention, but we can unintentionally do harm. And getting back to the why, do we want safe, healthy, and whole young people within their own families and communities? So this is stepping away from the mindset of fixing or replacing, because that replacement mentality can cause unintentional life-standing harm. So yes, those supports would be structural and cultural, in my opinion. And accepting that we can understand and support needs and wants without agreeing. Those do not have to be hand in hand. And if one knows this isn't what you feel is best for me, but you understand this is what I need or want, and you're willing to still stand behind me, that fosters not only belonging, but confidence, outlook on self and what one's capable of doing. So those are some small supports that older adult partners or agencies need to be able to fully support young people and help them feel like they belong.
And I'm curious.
I want to pull a little on that thread that it's just shared, and that is, I think oftentimes, we wonder in systems, like we're trying to help, but we're not. They're just not taking our help. Why is it that young people aren't resonating to these opportunities? And it's this piece of, it isn't an opportunity to me if it isn't what I need right now, or what I feel is going to move me to the next step, right? So we as adults often have the experience and expertise of the long view, right? And the wider lens. But for young people, it is the step-by-step building their own journey and path. And so it is supporting them on that. And that is a hard thing to do. It is hard as a parent, right? It's hard as a worker. It's hard as a professional. It's hard in our community. But it truly involves commitment to that growth and development. And so, in many ways, I think of myself as a parent. I have 5 children, and they are my best laboratory. And I remember talking with another friend who was an early childhood professional who had 3 very rambunctious boys. And I used to say to her, how do you do it? And she used to say to me, I pretend they're not mine. I pretend they're someone else's kids, because sometimes I can be more compassionate to someone else's children than I can to my own, right? And that has stuck with me through the years as a professional and as a parent, because sometimes we need that distance to find that compassion within us so that we don't get into those power struggles. Like Jazz was saying, it's not agreement, it's acknowledgement, it's seeing you, really seeing our young people and where they are.
I'm curious if there are any things that got sparked in what the other said that you want to put on the table, or just any kind of final thoughts in our last 5 minutes or so.
I just want to acknowledge Yaz and her courage and her skill in really bringing the learnings, right, and the deep reflection of her story, and what she said of I belong, right? I was chosen. All of us want that and need that. And it is just, it really is moving for me to hear her story.
Thank you, Enid. I'm definitely inspired by you as well, and I look forward to a connection this year. But one thing I do want to add, and it's very important when thinking of belonging for young people, is take a step back and reflect on your experience transitioning from adolescence to adulthood and what was present that contributed to your own sense of belonging. And when it comes to systems, everything has to be so structured, and it's for safety and protection of the youth. But we take out so much of the human aspect of growing, failing forward, which isn't really a thing. It's just having an experience and seeing which way it goes. But that is taken away, and that attributes to our sense of identity and belonging. So as a reflective piece, I would add, just consider what was in place for yourself and how that is cultivated in the current system or discouraged. And that can be a great starting point.
And Alicia and folks, I just want to acknowledge my 4th grade teacher, Carol Clifford, who is on today, and just thank her publicly in this forum for everything that she's brought to all our kids here in Hartford in her many, many, many years as an educator, as even taking on leadership roles in the teachers union to make sure that kids were at the center of the work. I didn't know that she would be able to join us, but it is, Ms. Clifford, just an honor to remember that class. Thank you.
Any final thoughts as we transition from main stage to being in conversation with each other about the themes that we heard and how we kind of think about kind of stories and where, right, within those stories, adult connections can occur to support belonging? Any final thoughts? So with that, I want to thank you, Enid. Thank you, Jazz. And all due shout outs to all of the amazing individuals who go alongside us in our journeys.